We say we're just being helpful. We want to be generous, supportive, reliable. But underneath that well meaning intention, there's often a quieter truth we're not telling ourselves. We're trying to create external order so we can feel internal security. Anne Lamott said, "Help is the sunny side of control." And it's true. When we jump in to fix, rescue, and manage everything for everyone else, we're not just being generous, we're trying to feel safe. Because if we can just hold it all together, if we can just fix things fast enough, carry the weight early enough, and anticipate needs before they even arise, maybe nothing will fall apart. Maybe we won't be blindsided, and maybe we won't be disappointed again. But here's the problem. When we carry what isn't ours because someone else won't, we reinforce their helplessness and our own anxiety. We tell ourselves we're needed, but what we're really doing is trying to engineer certainty. We become addicted to being the one who knows, the one who does, the one who handles. We confuse being needed with being loved. We confuse being indispensable with being secure. And before you know it, overfunctioning isn't just a role, it's an identity. We don't know who we are without the stress. We don't know what we would do if no one needed rescuing. We keep jumping in, not because we want to, but because the silence that follows letting go feels like free fall, like chaos, like danger. After my divorce, my ex-husband told people I had been a controlling wife. And I was furious because I hadn't wanted to be in control of everything. He just refused to step up. So I did what I'd always done. I took over. I kept the ship afloat. I managed. I handled everything. I overfunctioned. But what I didn't realize then was that I had a choice. I thought if I didn't take the lead, everything would fall apart. And maybe it would have. But eventually I learned that I could stop steering the ship and bailing water, and that if he didn't want to join me at the helm, I could let the ship sink and rise again. That it was actually okay to let the whole thing fail, and I would still be okay. For a long time, I thought my divorce was my turning point, not trying to coddle a man and shrink myself and take on more duties to make him feel better. But it was only the beginning. When I left my next relationship 4 years later, I had thought I'd learned the bigger lesson, how to slow down and be in the moment, and not to believe words when actions didn't align. But growth doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves. It circles back, it deepens, it isn't linear, and it isn't something you graduate from. Each unraveling reveals another layer. Each release makes space for something new, and each time we learn to let go just a little bit more and trust ourselves a little deeper. It would be years before I understood the missing piece, internal safety, because what I didn't know then was that my need to overfunction wasn't just about being helpful, it was about anxiety. High functioning anxiety that had been repressed for so long I couldn't even see it. I had grown up in a home, a religion, and a culture that taught me to outsource truth. Although at the time, I believed their truth was my truth, and that things were black and white. But in reality, I learned to trust rules instead of instincts, to equate obedience with goodness, to confuse logic with intuition. And from my early days till adulthood, I never developed a sensitivity to my inner compass, the subtle signals in my body that could tell me what was safe, what was aligned, and what was mine to carry. Without that compass, I relied on control. Overfunctioning became my way of engineering safety, trying to prevent collapse by preventing chaos. I was only doing what all the people I knew around me were doing, from my parents to my ecclesiastical leaders to my academic teachers and peers. I had no idea that I was even seeking safety. It wasn't part of my vocabulary since I thought safety was just physical. But the safety I needed wasn't just my environment, it was inside of me. And until I reconnected with that internal sense of safety, that grounded, embodied discernment, no amount of control could ever make me feel truly secure. High functioning anxiety can look like success, like generosity, like strength. But underneath, it's actually fear. It's the fear of everything falling apart unless we hold it all together. It's the fear of being blindsided again. It's the fear that if we stop being needed, we'll stop being loved, or worse, we'll stop being relevant. We become loved for what we do, not who we are, and for how well we anticipate others' needs, how tirelessly we manage their lives for them. And while we may tell ourselves we're being loving, generous, and selfless, in truth, we're managing, fixing, and caretaking out of fear. Fear that if we let go, we'll be invisible, forgotten, replaced. And the people we're working so hard to support, often they feel disempowered, resentful, useless, like they're being parented or managed, not partnered with. But in our minds, their resentment reads as ingratitude, as a lack of appreciation for all we're doing. We don't see how we're perpetuating the very dynamic we claim to resent. High functioning anxiety can also look like being hardworking, detail oriented, high achieving, ambitious, perfectionistic, organized, well prepared, and calm under pressure. But inside, it often feels like overthinking, overwhelm, burnout, trouble saying no to others, and trouble saying yes to ourselves. It looks like a constant need to stay busy, holding ourselves and others to unrealistic expectations, being self critical, people pleasing, fearing failure, and doubting ourselves, even when we appear confident on the outside. This pattern ties directly to how we make decisions, too. Many of us learn to make choices based on external systems of morality, what good boys and girls do. We were taught to obey authority, not to cultivate internal guidance. Our decisions weren't based on self-trust or discernment, but on compliance, approval, and the fear of doing it wrong. And because of that, we often don't even know what we want, only what's expected. True power isn't about holding it all together. It's about trusting that you won't fall apart, even if everything else does. For many of us who overfunction, there's this myth that all we need to do is lean into receiving, as if receiving is just a mindset, as if we can just flip a switch. But receiving isn't just an act, it's a nervous system state. If we've only ever felt safe when we're in control, then being on the receiving end, being still, open, vulnerable, can feel terrifying. To receive can feel wrong, unsafe, like we're lazy or weak or unworthy. It stirs up shame. It pokes at old wounds. It makes our bodies scream. So learning to receive isn't about effort, it's about healing. It's about rewiring our nervous system so that rest doesn't feel like danger and slowness doesn't feel like failure. It's about building enough internal safety that we don't need to control everything in order to feel okay. Because the truth is, we can't receive what we don't feel safe having. Love, help, support, ease, peace. We say we want it, but until our bodies trust it, we'll keep pushing it away. But here's what makes it even trickier. I tried to receive before I had that internal compass. I tried to trust, not from self-trust, but from hope. And I chose people who offered help with strings attached. Just like I tried to control my environment by overfunctioning, many of the people I tried to receive from were giving in order to control their environment, to earn approval, to avoid rejection, to feel indispensable. That's what made it so confusing. I thought I was finally leaning back, finally softening, finally letting people show up for me. But their giving wasn't rooted in love, it was rooted in fear. Just like mine, their kindness came with an agenda. Their support came with a cost, and I couldn't see it because I hadn't learned to discern. For many women, especially those raised in high control or high expectation environments, we are not taught to listen inward. We're taught to obey, perform, and earn our worth. So when we try to trust or receive, we're doing so without the very thing that makes those acts safe: discernment. Learning to trust others is its own complicated journey. When you grow up in a home where people follow through, where promises are kept and responsibilities shared, you assume that that's how the world works. I did. I grew up in a household where discipline and reliability were modeled, where faith, commitment, and sacrifice were the norm. So when I entered the dating world, I expected men to be trustworthy, consistent, and full of integrity. But again and again, I met avoidance, manipulation, and broken promises. And instead of adjusting my lens, I clung harder to the belief that if I stayed loyal and kept showing up with integrity, the right people would too. What I didn't realize is that I wasn't seeing people clearly. I was projecting my own values onto them. I mistook generosity for character, apologies for accountability, and promises for partnership. It took years and a lot of painful lessons to understand that I had to stop looking for signs of trustworthiness outside of myself and start reconnecting with my own inner signals. My body had always known the truth, but I had been trained to override it. I had to start learning how to listen to my nervous system, to the subtle cues in my body, tension, contraction, unease, and stop gaslighting myself out of what I knew. That was the beginning of discernment. That was the beginning of real trust. And it brought me full circle back to overfunctioning because ultimately, overfunctioning is a symptom. It's not the root. It's the strategy we adopt when we don't feel safe, when we don't trust life, when we don't trust others, when we don't trust ourselves. We try to control the external world because the internal world doesn't feel chaotic, it feels blank. That's not just a semantic distinction, it's a crucial psychological and somatic insight. Blankness isn't neutral, it's disconnection, and disconnection is deeply unsafe. When you can't feel yourself, you don't have access to your inner compass. That numbness, not intensity, is the deeper threat because it leaves you without orientation, without ground. It's like being suspended in a void where no decisions feel anchored in truth. And that's why we find the external control. This is especially true for those of us raised in high control environments. We weren't taught to feel. We were taught to comply, achieve, and perform. So, of course, we tried to create order outside of ourselves because there was no felt sense of order inside. And yes, that creates habitual overfunctioning, not just from fear, but from ingrained patterning that feels like safety because it's familiar. So we default to what we know. We micromanage people, overplan outcomes, preempt needs, and stay 3 steps ahead. Not because we're strong, but because we've made a habit of survival through control. We don't do it because we want to be in charge. We do it because letting go feels like free fall, like nothing will catch us. We fear the collapse of our relationships, of our plans, of ourselves. But the answer isn't just enacting boundaries or stepping back from our fixer roles. Those are surface solutions. The real cure is cultivating an internal sense of safety, building embodied self-trust, coming back to sensation, to feeling, to knowing what is and being okay with it. When people talk about self-love, it often sounds like being nice to yourself. But real self-love isn't just kindness. It's the capacity to stay with what is true. It's the ability to sit with discomfort without abandoning yourself. It's the grounded knowing that the world will not collapse under you if you stop. And if it does, you don't have to collapse with it. You will be okay. That is the kind of safety that changes everything. Boundaries are part of that change, not as hard walls, but as external reinforcements of an internal compass. When we talk about boundaries, we're really talking about values, about self-respect, about clarity. A boundary says, I know who I am and what matters to me. It says, I will not abandon myself to keep the peace. And that's why boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about making space to love from a place of wholeness. As Prentice Hemphill says, a boundary is the distance at which I can love both you and me simultaneously. So the real work is becoming more you. The version that trusts, feels, and knows that you'll be okay. And here's what might surprise you. There's a beauty on the other side of this shift. When you shed the Superwoman identity, when you stop rescuing, fixing, and managing everyone else, you make space to ask a new question. Who am I when I'm not living for everyone else? You're allowed to be more than what you do for others. You're allowed to take up space, move slower, receive fully. You're allowed to experience relationships built on reciprocity and authenticity. Want to imagine what life could look like on the other side of overfunctioning? Join my free Facebook group for women who are ready to rewrite the rules of what it means to be a loving, strong, powerful woman from the inside out. Or if you're ready to go deeper, schedule a one-on-one call with me. Together, we'll stop managing their world and start creating yours. Because letting go isn't the end of your identity, it's the beginning of your liberation. Links are in the description below.